Something is happening in your life right now that doesn't feel normal, and deep inside, you already sense it. Certain situations are unfolding too fast, certain people are acting too strangely, and certain opportunities look perfect but feel slightly off. That feeling is not confusion, it is warning, because what you are walking into is not random, it is structured. And if you stop watching now, you may miss the one message that explains why everything around you suddenly feels like it is being arranged against your peace. Stay until the end, because what looks like coincidence is actually a setup being exposed in real time. Not every opportunity that enters your life is truly meant to elevate you, and this is where most people unknowingly walk into traps disguised as blessings. When something appears suddenly that aligns with your desires, your goals, or even your emotional cravings, the mind immediately assumes it must be right. But alignment is not always about what feels exciting in the moment. It is about what remains stable under pressure and truth. A trap does not present itself as danger, it presents itself as timing, luck, or a once-in-a-lifetime chance. It often comes when you are emotionally vulnerable, slightly impatient, or silently frustrated with delays in your life, because that is when judgment becomes softer and intuition becomes easier to override. The opportunity may look like the answer to everything you have been waiting for, but the deeper layer of it is not about what it offers. It is about what it extracts from you once you accept it. Some doors open not because they are meant for you to walk through them, but because they are meant to reveal how you respond when something tempting appears at the wrong time. The danger lies in rushing, in assuming that speed equals destiny, and in believing that anything that arrives quickly must be divinely aligned. Real alignment does not pressure you into urgency. It gives you clarity, even in stillness. But a disguised trap creates emotional acceleration. It makes you feel like you will miss out if you do not act immediately. It removes patience from your thinking and replaces it with fear of loss. In that state, you stop observing details, you stop questioning inconsistencies, and you start filling gaps with assumptions that support your desire rather than your awareness. Later, when the excitement fades, you begin to notice what you ignored, the imbalance, the inconsistency, the subtle discomfort that was present from the beginning. But by then, the decision has already shaped your direction. That is why discernment is not about rejecting opportunities, it is about understanding the energy behind them before you commit your time, attention, and emotional investment. A real opportunity strengthens your clarity, while a disguised trap slowly shifts your attention away from your inner stability and toward external validation. And the moment you begin to recognize that difference, you stop reacting to appearances and start. The emotional setup is one of the most powerful and least recognized traps because it does not attack your logic directly. It quietly bypasses it through feeling. When emotions are involved, especially hope, fear of loss, loneliness, or desire for connection, your internal defense system becomes softer, and that is exactly when manipulation or misalignment becomes easier to enter your life. This is why many situations that later feel confusing or regrettable did not appear confusing at the start. They felt meaningful, intense, or emotionally significant in a way that seemed to answer something you were missing. The setup begins when your emotional state becomes louder than your inner awareness. You start interpreting intensity as truth and attention as intention, even when there is no real stability behind it. In that moment, your perception narrows, and you begin to see only what supports the emotional story you want to believe. Subtle red flags get dismissed because your emotional desire redefines them as normal, fixable, or not that serious. This is how the setup gains power, not by forcing you, but by aligning itself with what you already want to experience. Once emotion takes the lead, patience becomes uncomfortable, and waiting feels like losing. So you move faster than your awareness can keep up with, and decisions get made from urgency instead of clarity. The most dangerous part is that emotional setups often feel like destiny in the beginning. They create a sense of connection, timing, or meaning that feels too significant to question. But real alignment does not require you to abandon your inner voice. It does not ask you to ignore discomfort just to preserve excitement. Instead, it remains consistent even when emotions fluctuate. When you are inside an emotional setup, your reactions become reactive rather than reflective. You start defending what you barely examined, explaining what you never fully understood, and investing in what you never truly verified. Over time, this leads to internal imbalance, because your emotional investment grows faster than your actual understanding of the situation. And when reality eventually reveals itself, the contrast between what you felt and what is real becomes painful. That is why emotional awareness is not about shutting feelings down. It is about ensuring that feelings do not replace your ability to see clearly, responding to truth instead of illusion. When life suddenly starts moving too fast, it is easy to assume you are entering a breakthrough phase, but speed without clarity is often a sign of pressure rather than progress. Real growth has a rhythm that allows you to understand, adjust, and align with what is happening. But when everything accelerates without space for reflection, it becomes harder to recognize whether you are being guided or pushed. This is where many people get caught in situations they never fully evaluated because rapid movement creates emotional excitement that replaces careful observation. You begin to make decisions under the illusion of momentum, believing that fast movement must mean forward movement. But not all speed is direction. Sometimes it is distraction disguised as urgency. In these moments, life seems to present everything at once: opportunities, conversations, changes, or choices that demand immediate attention. The pressure to respond quickly overrides the natural process of discernment, and you start reacting instead of understanding. What makes this dangerous is that urgency often feels important, even when it is artificial. It creates the sensation that if you pause, you will lose something valuable, so you stop questioning and start complying with the pace of events. But clarity cannot survive in constant acceleration. When there is no pause, there is no space for intuition to fully register what is right or wrong for you. Instead, you rely on surface-level impressions, assuming that what feels active must also be aligned. Later, when things begin to settle, you may notice that certain decisions made in haste do not hold the same weight they once did in the moment. This is because emotional speed compresses your awareness, reducing your ability to see long-term consequences. A true aligned path may involve movement, but it never removes your inner sense of stability. Even in change, there is a quiet knowing that allows you to feel grounded. But when speed becomes overwhelming, that grounding disappears, and you are left navigating based on reaction rather than reflection. Recognizing this difference is essential because not every fast-moving situation is meant to be followed. Some are meant to be observed until clarity returns, so your direction is chosen, not forced. Some of the most influential shifts in your life are not caused by obvious obstacles, but by people who enter at the exact moment your direction is about to change. These connections rarely announce themselves as distractions. In fact, they often arrive with timing that feels meaningful, even destined, which is why they are so difficult to question at first. You may notice that just as you begin to gain clarity, focus, or emotional stability, someone appears who subtly pulls your attention in a different direction. At the surface, it feels like connection, support, or alignment, but underneath, it gradually shifts your energy away from what you were building internally. The problem is not always the person themselves. It is the timing, the influence, and the emotional investment they create while your awareness is still forming. These distractions do not always destroy your path directly. Instead, they dilute it. They scatter your focus, slow your momentum, and quietly replace inner discipline with emotional dependency. What makes this so difficult to detect is that it rarely feels harmful in the beginning. In fact, it often feels like a welcome interruption, something that brings relief during a period of pressure or uncertainty. But relief is not always guidance. Sometimes it is simply a pause that leads you away from your original direction. As emotional attachment grows, your priorities begin to shift without you consciously noticing. What once felt important starts to feel less urgent, and what once had clarity becomes blurred by emotional involvement. You start making decisions not based on alignment, but based on connection and comfort. Over time, your energy becomes divided between your true path and the influence of the new presence in your life. And whenever energy is divided, progress slows. The most subtle part of this setup is that it does not force you to abandon your goals. It simply makes them feel less important compared to what is currently in front of you. This is how distraction becomes direction without you realizing it. Only later, when distance or clarity returns, do you see how much of your attention was redirected. That is why awareness is critical when new influences enter during periods of growth, because not every presence is meant to support your evolution. Some are meant to test whether you can stay aligned with your path even when something emotionally compelling tries to pull you away from it. The most overlooked moment in any situation is the instant your inner warning appears, but you choose to override it. That quiet hesitation you feel before making a decision is not random fear. It is a form of awareness trying to slow you down so you can see more clearly. But in high emotion or high pressure situations, that signal is often dismissed because it does not match what you want to believe or what you are being pushed to accept externally. The mind tends to rationalize discomfort by labeling it as overthinking, doubt, or insecurity, and once that happens, the intuitive signal gets pushed aside. This is where misalignment begins, not because you lacked information, but because you ignored the information that was already inside you. The inner warning is never loud. It does not compete with emotion or urgency. It appears as subtle resistance, a slight pause in certainty, or a feeling that something is not fully settled. But because it lacks intensity, it is often undervalued. Meanwhile, external influence, whether from people, timing, or opportunity, can feel much louder and more convincing, which makes it easier to trust over your own internal sense. The danger increases when you repeatedly override that inner signal, because each time you do, you weaken your ability to recognize it clearly in the future. You begin to normalize decisions that do not fully feel right, and over time, your standard for alignment shifts downward without you noticing. What was once a clear boundary becomes flexible, and what once felt uncomfortable becomes acceptable. This gradual erosion of inner trust is how many people find themselves in situations they never consciously intended to enter. The most important thing to understand is that intuition does not disappear. It becomes quieter when it is ignored and stronger when it is followed. Every time you listen to it, clarity increases. Every time you dismiss it, confusion grows. The real setup is not just in external circumstances, but in the repeated choice to trust everything except your own internal awareness. And once you recognize this pattern, you begin to see that your inner warning was never trying to stop your progress. It was trying to protect the direction of it. There comes a critical point in every unfolding situation where avoidance is no longer possible, and you are forced to see things exactly as they are, not as you hoped they would be. This is the exit point, the moment where awareness becomes more important than attachment, and clarity becomes more valuable than comfort. Every setup, every misleading situation, every emotional or external influence has this moment built into it, a point where you still have the ability to step back before deeper consequences take shape. But the challenge is that this moment rarely feels dramatic. It does not arrive with alarms or obvious warnings. Instead, it shows up as a quiet internal knowing that something is not fully right, combined with external pressure that tries to convince you to proceed anyway. This is where most people hesitate, because leaving or changing direction at this stage feels uncomfortable, uncertain, or even irrational compared to the momentum already built. But what makes this moment powerful is that it is the last point where your awareness still has full control over your direction. Beyond this, decisions begin to carry more weight, consequences become more fixed, and emotional entanglement makes separation more difficult. The exit point is not about fear, it is about timing. It is the final opportunity to choose alignment over attachment, clarity over impulse, and self-awareness over external influence. Many people miss this moment because they are focused on what they might lose rather than what they might preserve, their stability, their clarity, and their original direction. Once this point is crossed without awareness, the situation deepens, and what could have been a simple correction becomes a longer experience that requires more effort to untangle. But when you do recognize it, something important happens. You regain authority over your direction. You stop moving on momentum alone and start moving with intention again. This is where transformation becomes conscious instead of reactive. And in that awareness, you realize that the real power was never in entering every opportunity or connection, but in knowing when to step back before losing alignment with yourself. So now, bring everything together and see the full picture clearly, not as separate warnings, but as one continuous truth unfolding in your life. The trap was never just one moment, one person, or one opportunity. It was the pattern of ignoring your inner awareness while reacting to what looked urgent, emotional, or meaningful on the surface. Every keynote was pointing to the same reality. Not everything that enters your life is meant to guide you forward, and not every fast-moving situation is aligned just because it feels important in the moment. What you called confusion was actually distortion caused by speed, emotion, and external influence. What you called opportunity may have been pressure in disguise. And what you called delay was often protection, giving you time to see what your emotions were trying to rush past. The emotional setups, the fast-moving moments, the distracting connections, the ignored warnings, they were all variations of the same test. Will you trust what you feel in the moment, or will you trust the deeper awareness trying to guide you underneath it? And here is the real shift. The moment you stop overriding your inner voice, everything begins to reorganize. You don't need to fear every opportunity, every connection, or every change. You only need to stop abandoning yourself in the process of choosing them. Because the real trap was never external alone. It was the repeated decision to ignore what you already knew but didn't want to accept. This is where everything changes, not when life becomes easier, but when your awareness becomes stronger than your impulse. In that awareness, urgency loses its control, emotion becomes information instead of direction, and clarity becomes your default state instead of confusion. You no longer chase every opening, you observe, you feel, and you choose with alignment. And in that moment of clarity, you realize something powerful. You were never meant to follow everything that looked like destiny. You were meant to recognize what actually aligns with your truth.